Good evening and welcome everyone to the September 5th Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. My name is Luke Mortensen and tonight I'm with Catherine Week, Staff Liaison to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We will work alongside the Chair to facilitate this evening's meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on the city's YouTube and public access channels. For those on Zoom, please mute yourself when not actively speaking, and please keep your video on for the duration of the meeting. There will not be screen sharing as a part of the meeting this evening. All attachments, reference materials, and submissions from the public are included in tonight's agenda packet. The Chair will call for in-person and virtual public comment for those who wish to speak. All motions will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, staff will call on each commissioner individually to provide their vote. Staff will then need to announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. I'll now toss to Catherine to determine if we have quorum tonight.
Good evening, board members. Just before we do quorum, I also want to introduce, we have a new board member on with us tonight. Darren Sinkler is joining us as his first meeting. So just want to welcome him aboard, and then we can go on into a roll call for quorum. Herod?
Here.
Palos?
Here.
Rankin?
Here.
Here.
Shalinski?
I'm here.
Shanuda?
Here.
Sinkler?
Here.
And Watkins.
Here.
All right, we do have quorum.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. We have 3 matters to discuss. The first order of business is to acknowledge any communications to come before the board. With regard to the third agenda item, we received the report from the planning director, as well as several letters that were in the materials. In addition to that, I received 2 letters by email, which I assume other members of the board also received. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So, Chair, I would correct you. Not all of the members received those emails.
Excuse me?
Not all of the members were on the email chain for those 2 emails, and the email communications, I believe they're the same ones that are in the packet. They were added to the packet.
Okay. Were there any ex parte communications that anyone would like to disclose, other than what I've already discussed? Okay, and finally, are there any items to be deferred tonight?
There are no items to be deferred tonight, Chair.
All right. We wear several hats here, and one of our hats is the Board of Sign Code Appeals, and so we're going to start with that. On the agenda, this is item C, number 1. This is for a proposed sign variance at I believe that says 2111 West 33rd Street, otherwise known as Culver's. And I would like to ask staff to do the staff report on this item.
And this is Catherine Week, Staff Liaison. We have Timberly French presenting this item. She's with the Building Safety Division. They handle the sign permit applications.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for having me. Here to present the staff report for the sign code variance. This is a request to deviate from the provisions of the sign code, section 5-1818F, for restrictions by sign type for permanent internal ground signs. The request is to allow two 38.39 square foot signs that will be set back at least 50 feet from a public right-of-way and located further back from the wall of the primary use building that faces a right-of-way. The property is zoned PCD. So the sign code, or the restrictions allowed for this type of sign, the permanent internal ground sign, they've requested two permanent internal ground signs proposed to serve as menu boards for the newly reconfigured drive-through lanes. Based on what the sign code allows, the number of signs proposed are approvable. So they proposed two. The sign area that's calculated by the sign code section for calculating sign area for each proposed individual sign is 38.39 square feet. The proposed signs are set back from the public right-of-way a distance more than 50 feet, and they're both located further back than the wall of the primary use building. And both signs are serving a drive-through facility. So based on the setback, the location of the signs, the maximum sign area allowed by code for each sign is 32 square feet. The proposed sign area for each sign is 38.39 square feet, and it is not approvable based on this section of the code for the allowable square footage. The proposed signs are both 6 foot 3 feet in height. They're set back, as we discussed, more than 50 feet from the public right-of-way, and they're also behind the primary building line. So the sign code allows the height of these permanent internal ground signs to be 8 feet maximum. And the proposed sign height for each is 6 foot 3 feet. I'm sorry, 6 foot 3 inches. So that is approvable. The proposed signs are internally illuminated, and the sign code does allow this. The criteria for approval of a variance and the staff analysis. Sign code says, per section 5-1828, the board may grant variances from any person seeking a sign permit that cannot meet the restrictions or standards of the sign code upon the determination that all of the following findings have been fully met. Number one, at the time a variance is granted by the board shall find that the variance request arises from conditions that are unique to the location in question, which are not ordinarily found in the same zoning district, and that the unique conditions are not caused or created by an action or actions of the property owner or applicant. Staff has found that the conditions noted in the request for the variance do not appear to be unique to the location in question. An increase of allowable sign area to accommodate an extensive menu is not a unique condition and could be altered by the property owner. The second item is at the time a variance is granted by the board shall find that the granting of the variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare, including the visual appearance of the area, or injurious to the property or improvements in such zoning districts or neighborhoods in which the property is located. Staff finds an increase of 6.39 square feet to each menu board sign would not impact the visual appearance of the area or negatively impact the neighborhood. Staff finds that this condition has been met. The third and final item, at the time a variance is granted by the board, The board shall find that the strict application of the requirements of Article 18, Chapter 5 of the City Code would result in legal difficulties or unnecessary hardships to the owner or applicant, inconsistent with the general purpose and intent of the sign code. Such practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships may include compliance with amended provisions of the sign code that were not in effect at the time a predecessor sign was installed. Staff finds that strict application of the requirements of Article 18, Chapter 5 may result in an unnecessary hardship. While the proposed sign does not conform with the prescriptive requirements of the sign code for the allowed sign area, it may benefit the public welfare to vary the code to allow for an increase in the area in the amount of 6.39 square feet per sign. The need for a larger menu board is, in the opinion of staff, more of a convenience in nature, but may serve a purpose to customers as stated by the applicant. Staff analysis determined that the request does not meet all three criteria above for the granting of a variance. Staff recommends denial of the variance for the increase in sign area because all three of the criteria for approval have not been met. Strict application of the sign code regulations would not cause practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships to the applicant. The requested variance would not be detrimental to the public welfare. However, conditions are not unique to the location in question. And that is all for our staff report.
All right, I'm going to ask whether board members have any questions for the staff. Anyone?
I do. Does anybody else in town have this kind of sign? Or is like McDonald's, any other place have this size of signs?
I've never brought a variance in front of the board for an increase to the 32 square feet for a menu board sign. A permanent internal ground sign, no.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a question. There is currently a sign there on the premises for the drive-through, and my understanding is the reason for this application is to have two signs in order that there could be two drive-through lanes. So my question is, what is the size of the currently existing sign? And is it in or out of compliance with the sign code?
I cannot verify the existing size of the sign from the applicant submitting it. I couldn't find a sign permit for the existing sign. There was no sign permit on file for the menu board sign. So when it was installed, it wasn't included in the original sign package. I believe the applicant listed in their letter for their request for variance, the size of the sign was not increasing. So the 38 square foot menu board sign, I believe, is just being replaced because they're reconfiguring the parking lot. They have to remove their existing signs and install new signs. I can't verify that though. There was no permit on file for the menu board signs.
So Chair, if I may, there is a site plan application in file for this particular property as well. So as part of the remodel or the reconfiguration of the site, there are site changes that are being undertaken, and the sign code has been updated potentially since previous signs were installed. So that could be why those signs were not included individually under a permit in the past. But because they're doing a site plan, the things that they change on the site plan in a standard site plan review, they do have to come into compliance with current codes that are on the books for any changes that they're making.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Any other questions for staff? All right, let's hear from the applicant.
Good evening. I assume everyone can hear me.
Yes?
Hi, I'm Trey Watts with Springfield Sign, based out of Springfield, Missouri. I represent the local Culver's franchisee, Mark Schuler, but also Culver's nationwide for their signage program. I appreciate the board hearing me tonight. Just to answer the question that was posed right before I was able to talk, the current menu board that is at the site is exactly the same size as what we're proposing for 2 new ones. Staff was correct because of the site changes and the way they're going to reconfigure the lot. We have to replace them, or we have to relocate one of them, and then at that time, the owner was wanting 2 new ones because LED technology, new lighting, better maintenance, but it is physically the same size as the menu board that is currently utilized at that restaurant. This is a request for internal signs. I agree with everything of the staff report. The only thing I do have one comment on for meeting the 3 items of variance, I do feel that we do meet all 3 items. Specifically, this is a brand standard menu board for Culver's, so this is what you see across new locations that are being built and as they remodel. This is the standard menu board we put on every site, and Culver's being a franchise, the idea is whether you're enjoying Culver's in Lawrence, Kansas, or Springfield, Missouri, where I'm from, or down in Florida, you have the same experience, whether you're in the restaurant or you're going through drive-through. To me, you know, of course, I'm a sign company and everybody looks at me as, well, I'm trying to sell signs for a living, but this is a different application to me. This is a menu board. So the idea of this sign is not to grab guests off the street and bring them into the restaurant. That's not the purpose of this sign. This sign is purely guest education and efficiency through their drive-through to get a guest at an order point to look at that menu board, have the choices that are up there, make their decision and move on and not back up. You know, if we were not able to do the standard size menu board that we've proposed, basically what that means for this franchise operator is that menu board does not display all the items that Culver's has. And what tends to happen is the line or the transactions that go through there slow down because there's more questions. Culver's has a very diverse menu. Of course, everybody knows Butterburgers and frozen custard, but they have pork sandwiches, fish sandwiches, salads, soups. I mean, pork tenderloin dinners. I mean, they're more than just a burger and French fry joint. So that is why the menu board is maybe slightly larger than what you see in other quick serve restaurants. So again, I mean, I'm here to answer any technical questions the board might have as well. But from our standpoint, you know, this is an internal guest education sign. We're not trying to grab more guests or, you know, plaster a big sign on the side of the building to, you know, flash Culver's is here. This is purely guest education and keeping transactions moving and keeping guests moving through that line. So one, the franchisee is successful, you know, getting guests through there, but also every guest that comes in there hopefully has a good experience moving through that line. Again, thank you all very much. And any questions you may have, I'm here to answer them.
All right. Do any of the board members have questions for the applicant?
Yeah, one question, Chair. This is Patrick Watkins. Can you tell us if you're planning to reuse the existing sign, or are you replacing that existing sign?
So currently, the plan is to put in 2 brand-new signs. We weren't going to reuse the existing one. And the only reason for that, this is more internal stuff of the signs. From our standpoint, we redesigned them for ease of use for the franchise operators of how they change their pictures out. Again, it doesn't really affect you, but the reason why we're updating both of them is some of those internal components of how they operate have been updated since that original board was placed. So he was using the opportunity, or Mr. Schuler was using the opportunity to get the kind of new technology that we have in our boards that didn't exist when the original one was placed.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, this is Dean. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm wanting to be sure. The 6-foot additional is for both sides. It's not, that's a single sign enlargement versus 2. Am I getting that correct? Both signs would each be 6 feet over the 6 square feet.
Yes, sorry. So by code, we're allowed 32 square feet per menu board.
Right.
We are asking for 38.39, roughly the 6.39 square feet over per board. So, because both boards are identical, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. I have another question for the staff. The applicant stated that this is not a typical sign in that it's not out on the street trying to get people to come to the restaurant. It is essentially a menu board for people that are already coming there. So there is a maximum allowable area per sign, and I'm assuming that there are maximum number of signs allowed. I guess where I'm going with this question is I'm trying to figure out what is the difference between this and, say, Sonic, where you've got 30 signs that together probably have a whole lot more area than these 2. And where does that fit within the code?
Great. So I would have to research the Sonic signs. Technically, those coming in, I haven't reviewed any of those under our currently adopted sign code. Thinking about the code requirements and restrictions and allowances, I would say that those signs are probably, they may be considered pedestrian signs, not so much as internal ground signs. Those signs may be not considered the same type of sign that this is. I'm not sure. There are some Sonics that have a drive-through, and those signs, depending on, so the sign code, it's you can't base the sign review on content. So you have to determine what kind of a sign it is based on the function of the sign. If the menu board is functioning as a, what we would call a permanent pedestrian sign, it may not have the same restrictions or limitations that an internal ground sign would have. These types of menu boards, where they're located and what they're being used for, like directional signs or signs that are, I can pull the definition here really quick. I'm just saying the signs for Sonic may not be considered permanent internal ground signs, so they may have a different allowance than these signs do. I would have to look at that. A permanent internal ground sign is defined in the sign code. This is the type of sign we classified this sign as, the two menu boards. A sign with the design and scale to be legible to pedestrians or vehicles navigating or using the internal roads, sidewalks, walkways, or parking lots of a site, except for signs placed at entrance or exit driveways to direct vehicular traffic safely onto or from the interior portions of a site, generally not legible to vehicles or pedestrians in the public rights of way. Internal ground signs may be freestanding signs. The reason we call these permanent internal ground signs are because when you look through the sign code, they specifically have requirements for drive-through signs. So when you look through the sign code requirements for a permanent internal ground sign, they talk about signs serving drive-through facilities, maybe 32 square feet maximum, when they're set back at least 50 feet from the right-of-way and located further back from the wall of the primary use building. They're allowed to be that 32 square feet, but they talk about specifically through drive-throughs. So that's why we consider these permanent internal ground signs. I don't know if a Sonic where you pull up and park, if that's, I don't know if that would be considered a drive-through. I imagine it might be. I don't really know how to answer the question without doing some more research on the code. And
Okay, I appreciate your shot at it.
thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions for staff or applicant?
I have a question for staff, Board Member Rankin. The applicant's asking for an additional 6.39 square feet. Is that all that's going to be allowed if we approve this variance, or is it infinite beyond the 32 square feet?
Go ahead, Catherine. I think you can.
Yeah, so the variance request is only for what is being asked for. They would not be able to exceed that amount.
Okay, thank you.
We've got a question. This is Patrick Watkins. Catherine or Timberly, you had mentioned that maybe there was a reduction in the amount of allowable sign square footage. Is that, do you have any specifics on that, or could you repeat that if there have been changes to that allowance?
Timberly's a little more familiar with the sign code, but I do think there were some changes that impacted, one, how signs were classified. Again, that might come back to the difference between a Sonic sign and an internal drive-through sign, and some area allotments. But Timberly may have some more specifics at the ready if she has the code open. I'm not sure.
I do not have the old code, and I have only ever done reviews under the currently adopted sign code that we adopted in 2017. So I don't know what was previously allowed for these types of signs. I don't know, Patrick, was it maybe what I was talking about where, so for a permanent internal ground sign, you start with a base allowance of 4 square feet. And so that would be your maximum sign area for this type of permanent internal ground sign. Well, if you are serving a drive-through and set back at least 50 feet and behind the building line, the maximum now is brought up to 32 square feet. Was that what I was talking about, or was that something else?
Well, that's helpful. I thought that, I mean, they've obviously got a sign of this size there, and it was site planned with it. You know, I'm just curious if the restrictions have tightened on them since they put the first one in.
I see. Yes, I did not look at, I didn't look at the previous code to see what was allowed. I just saw that there were no sign permits on file for these signs. So they never got reviewed.
To piggyback on what Mr. Watkins is asking, I know that on the next item that we're going to be hearing, a lot of the staff analysis turns on the fact that there were changes to the code where when the original construction took place, there was one setback, and then when the zoning code changed, the setback changed. And so that sort of put the applicant behind the eight ball a little bit in that the rules changed. And so if that happened here, that would be something relevant for this board to consider.
Did you want any comment or question from staff on that, or?
You are welcome to comment, yes.
So the sign code is a little different than the zoning code. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily a fair comparison for zoning variances versus sign code variances. The difference primarily being that the sign code is based on current development, like if they have to modify the site that impacts the sign, or if they're just going to, there may not be any development at all, it just strictly relates to that sign itself, whereas a Board of Zoning Appeals variance or a zoning variance is related to zoning district changes and platting or land action changes. So it is a little different, although the thought process is similar. I mean, it is a notable point, but the two processes are slightly different. So.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to ask if there's any public comment on this item. Anything in the room or online?
I am not seeing anything online.
And I'm not seeing anything in the room. So we're going to close the public hearing portion of this item and bring it back to the board for any further discussion or motions, and certainly you are welcome to address either the staff or the applicant if that will assist in our deliberations. What do you all want to do with this one? Don't
Patrick,
everybody
I'm
talk at
inclined to-
once.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm inclined to support it. The variance. I think that there are some unique conditions at the site, especially with regard to the previous sign. I agree with staff that it's not detrimental to the public welfare. I think there are practical difficulties imposed upon the applicant. I like what they're doing on top of that. Notwithstanding the criteria that we have to conform to with this BZA hearing, the double driveways, large signage, good pictures, it all lends toward a better experience for the folks that are coming through the drive-through. So I like what they're doing, and the fact that they had a previous sign of this size, to me, makes a lot of difference, both for that first and third element. So I'm inclined to support it.
Any other comments from board members?
I'll piggyback, I'm kind of the same way with the current sign being
This
the,
is Dean.
oh, go ahead, Dean.
I have to agree with Patrick. I think there is a uniqueness in the fact that the existing sign didn't seem to go through a process other than through the site planning process. And that having visited the site, I can see that this is not going to adversely affect any of the nearby neighbors. And I agree with staff that there is some underlying benefit to the motorist. And so I'll support it as well.
All right, well, that's at least two people supporting it, so would one of you like to make a motion?
I don't have a ton of experience doing this, but I'll give it a whirl. I move to recommend approval of the requested variance for the increase in sign area for the permanent interior ground signs, because all three of the criteria for approval have been met.
That's just the way you do it, Patrick. Good job. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, second by Rankin. Is there any other discussion? Well, I will just say that I too visited the site. From the street, you can barely even tell that it's there, even though it's bigger than what might typically be approved. And they got a big menu. So I am sympathetic. Any other comments? We ready to vote? Staff, please call the roll.
Okay, staff liaison Catherine Week. Harrod,
Aye.
Palos,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
Shanuda,
Aye.
Sinkler,
Aye.
Watkins.
Aye.
And the motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
So Chair, just so you know, we will need to gavel out of the sign code, or the sign board, and then gavel back in and take roll for the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Right, so we have gone through items D and E, and item F, we are going to convene the Board of Zoning Appeals.
So we would need a motion to adjourn the sign code board first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll motion to adjourn the,
Second.
Ready for a vote?
Okay, we have a motion and second to adjourn the Sign Code Board of Appeals. Do we need to call the roll for
We
that?
can do a show of ayes and nays,
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
and the motion carries.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. We will now convene the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we'll go through the same process that we did previously briefly, just acknowledging communications, which we already discussed.
I do need to take roll again, Chair, just to make sure nobody has dropped off the meeting for the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Excuse me?
I still need to take roll for the Board of Zoning Appeals,
Oh.
just to make sure nobody has dropped
Okay.
off from attendance.
Go ahead.
Okay. Harrod,
Here.
Palos,
Here.
Rankin,
Here.
Shalinski,
Here.
Shanuda,
Here.
Sinkler,
Here.
and Watkins.
Here.
Okay, everyone's still here.
Okay. Any ex parte communications that people need to disclose other than what we've already discussed? And any items to be deferred?
We have no items to be deferred.
Okay. So this is a request for a variance, BZA 24-1004, for a variance from the required setback for a building. Applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the exterior side setback for a building from 40 feet to 30 feet. The applicant is Douglas County. The facility is the jail. Staff, would you please give the staff report?
Yeah, Staff Liaison Catherine Week. So good evening, board members. I'm presenting the item as mentioned by the chair for the property located at 3601 East 25th Street. This is for the Douglas County Detention Facility. They are seeking a setback from Section 2601B of the City Code, which regulates dimensional standards for the zoning districts. This particular zoning district is the GPI, or General Public and Institutional Use District, and the applicant is requesting a reduction from the minimum of 40 feet to a minimum of 30 feet for the side exterior setback located on the west side of the property. I'm doing zoning variance requests. The reason for this particular request is so that the jail can continue to expand in phases as necessary for operational purposes. This particular variance request arises from the condition that when the last modification to the jail occurred was prior to the 2006 code, and they were under a different zoning designation where the setback requirement was 30 feet. And it was approved under a site plan with that 30-foot setback. When reviewing the 5 criteria, the first criteria is that the variance request arises from conditions which are unique to the property in question or not ordinarily found in the same zoning district, and that are not created by action or actions of the property owner applicant. And again, this variance is originating from a proposal to continue that phase in construction as necessary for operational purposes under a previous site plan and under previous site restrictions that were approved when modifications were last made. The property was originally zoned a PID2, which is a planned industrial development, and then with that adoption of the new land development code in 2006, that zoning district converted to the GPI, or General Public and Institutional Use District, and it did have slightly different dimensional setback standards for that district, and that reduced that west setback standard adjacent to what would be the continuation of the roadway there on the west side from what would have been 30 feet to 40 feet. So the applicant is seeking relief from that change due to the zoning change. Staff did not feel that a change in zoning designation after development of the detention center began and under previous approvals is the fault or caused by the applicant themselves, but that is a change made outside of the applicant's control. So staff did find that it met criteria point 1, that the variance request arise from unique conditions not caused by the applicant. Criteria 2, that the granting of the variance is not adversely affecting the rights of adjacent or nearby property owners. Staff did, in staff's opinion, find that the requested variance would not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. Again, this is adjacent to right-of-way or future right-of-way as that roadway expands. Newspaper and mailed notice were provided to property owners. Those letters were dated August 14th of this year. And staff did not receive any inquiries or any contacts regarding this particular variance request. So staff does not feel that it would be detrimental or have negative impacts for neighboring property owners. The third criteria is that the strict application of the provisions of this chapter for which the variance is requested would constitute an unnecessary hardship upon the property owner. There is a specific definition for unnecessary hardship in 2017-01 of Land and Development Code, which is included in your staff report. Section 20601B regulates the dimensional standards for development. The code requires for the GPI district that there's a front setback of 15 feet abutting non-residential districts, a side exterior setback of 40 feet abutting street right-of-way, a side interior setback of 15 feet abutting non-residential districts, and a rear setback of 40 feet abutting any residential districts. I gave the contextual of that particular site. So to the rear, there is residential districts, it's rural residential, and the rest is non-residential and abutting right-of-way. The only setback that this applicant is asking for is that 40 feet abutting street right-of-way setback on the west, which is the setback that became restricted or greater for that applicant with that change of the code in 2006. Staff's of the opinion that the context of the change of the GPI zoning district and the increased setback requirements after development of the facility has begun and under previous approvals, site planning approvals, is not, it could create an unnecessary hardship, particularly for a community facility that has very specific operational requirements. So staff did feel that it met the third criteria based on zoning change, which is one of the criteria points for unnecessary hardship, either zoning or plating action. Criteria 4, that the variance desired would not adversely affect public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, or the general welfare of the public. Staff found that granting the variance or the requested variance would not create adverse effect upon the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the public. The variance would basically just permit that previous minimum setback of 30 feet adjacent to the right-of-way and permit that addition to extend out to that previous 30-foot setback. There should not be any spillover negative effects for the general public. And then criteria 5, that granting the variance desired would not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the code. In staff's opinion, the variance request would not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the code. The existing development of the site as a detention facility was approved under previous code requirements and is continuing to develop according to the operational needs of the facility. The development proposes to adhere to the setback condition on the west side of the property that would have been permitted under those previous approvals. And while this can't be considered, staff did find that it met the criteria on its own, but in review of the new code that is under review, the setback standards for what would be the equivalent to that GPI district might actually reduce down to more in the 15-foot range, which means this particular 30-foot setback would actually be greater than what may be in just a few months or early 2025. And again, that was not, it's just noted, but it was not in the review staff's criteria. Staff felt it met that on its own. So in conclusion, staff does feel that the request met all 5 conditions set forth in 2013-09 and is recommending approval of the variance request from 40 feet on that exterior setback to 30 feet on that exterior setback. And I would be happy to stand for any questions or clarifications if you should have them.
Okay. Do board members have any questions for staff? Okay. Let's hear from the applicant, which is the architecture firm that is designing this.
Good evening. My name is Matt Murphy with Trainer. We are the architect of record for the design team, and as staff has alluded, this does meet all 5 criteria. We're here to answer any additional questions you may have, but we did want to make one clarification. This is not an expansion of the existing facility. This is a standalone building that will be constructed along the west side and will be the public safety operation building, and this will accommodate expansion and relocation of the sheriff's office from the downtown judicial courts building as well. So this is part and parcel with the current project that's currently under site plan review separately, as it's a separate property downtown of the judicial and law enforcement building renovation.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions for the applicant? Okay. This is a public hearing, so is there anyone in the room or online from the public who would like to comment on this? I'll ask one more time. Anyone who would like to make a public comment? Okay, we will close the public hearing component of this item and bring it to the board for discussion and resolution. Anyone?
Yeah, I'm actually in favor of this, to approve it. It was beyond their control. You know, if they would have built that building then before the 2006 code, people have said, you build a building and nobody's utilizing it. So they were smart in using the money properly and waited. It's not their fault that code changed on them. And so I'm in favor of doing the 30-foot setback instead of 40, so.
All right. Anyone else?
I would also agree with that. The rules, as to your note earlier, the rules changed on them, and I would be in approval of the variance request.
Okay. Anyone else like to comment? Looks to me like we have a motion and a second, if anyone would like to make it official.
I'll do a motion to approve the setback from 40 to 30 feet.
Second?
And I'm assuming that motion includes a finding that all 5 conditions have been met? Is that a correct assumption?
That is correct.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, staff, please call the roll.
Harrod,
Aye.
Palos,
Aye.
Rankin,
Excuse me. I was going to say, I've lost my video connection with you guys.
we can still hear you.
You can hear me and I can
Yes.
hear you.
Okay. And was there an I in there?
Yes, there was an aye.
Okay. Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
Shanuda,
Aye.
Sinkler,
Aye.
Watkins.
Aye.
And that motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We are on to item I, miscellaneous. And
Yep.
this is receipt of a staff memo with regard to an appeal that was filed and not forwarded to the board, or actually it was initially forwarded, I believe, and then taken off of our agenda on the basis of a staff finding that the person appealing the action did not have standing. You all have received the memo as part of the packet and read it. I'll ask staff if there's any comments that you have beyond what the memo itself says. And then the board can talk about it.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, at the end of your discussion on this item, there was a request made for staff or the city attorney to kind of close the loop or give you an update as to what was the gist of what transpired with this particular item. So the planning director did prepare a memo for you to kind of close that loop. This is not a public hearing item. This is just basically the planning director giving you that update that you requested at the end of that discussion.
Do any board members have any questions or comments on this?
Mr. Chair, can I be heard?
Yes, please.
So when we were together in July, we had this issue come up, and at that time, it may have been more of us, but I know I specifically asked staff to come back to us and advise the Board of Zoning Appeals exactly why the appeal of the planning director's approval of floodplain development permit FP 23-00358 was not before us, because we had been getting some emails and we even had people in attendance that night, and so staff did exactly what I asked them to do that night. Is they referenced the matter, they gave us a timeline of what happened, and then they cited to legal authority and case law to support their decision not to refer that appeal onto the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I want to make sure that I acknowledge that I made that request to staff, and I'm satisfied with what they have transmitted back to us.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments or observations? Okay.
Dean?
Yeah.
This is Dean. Yes. I appreciated the memo that we received from staff. I think they made it very clear. And I've read at least all the memos or communications that have been sent to us via email, both by staff, forwarded through them, as well as that was sent to us directly. And my sense is that the people who are wanting us to review this have some sense that if we did that, that we could take some action on it. And I'm not sure we could take any action on it if we heard it as a public hearing item. But again, I asked staff on this. Am I correct about that? Is there any kind of action we could take, given that this is, as it is now, it's not a public hearing item?
So yeah, I would just refer board members to the memo. The memo pretty much outlines where the planning director landed and why the planning director landed there. This particular item is not an actionable item. This is just a memo update to the board members as requested.
And Mr. Chair, can I expand? Because I think I see where Dean is going with this. And so I would render my opinion if I could.
Go ahead.
So I think, Dean, what you're asking is, there might be some folks present tonight that want to talk to us about the planning director's approval of that floodplain development permit I referenced. And if this board, if we vote and to open public comment and, we can listen to it, but this item is not actionable before us tonight because it hasn't been properly noticed, right? So for something to be actionable before this board, it has to be noticed to the public that it's going to be decided by us. So, if we choose to open public comment and hear whatever, that's fine, but there's certainly, it would be improper for us to take any vote tonight on the planning director's approval of that, because it would be immediately an invalid decision because there's no notice regarding it. Just we've been provided a memo advising that the planning director found that the individual who wanted to do that appeal was not an aggrieved party per statute or case law, and so that's why they didn't refer the appeal to us.
Well, what we could do is we could ask that the item be referred to us. And at that point, there would be notice, there would be a public hearing, it would go through the process. My concern about this is that we have an appeal to this board of a decision by the planning director, and the planning director makes a decision that the appellant doesn't have standing based on an inquiry. I think it is fine that an inquiry is made, but an investigation is one thing and a essentially quasi-judicial decision is another thing. I personally would have been more comfortable if the matter had been referred to us with a recommendation that the matter not be considered because of lack of standing, and then we could hear evidence on that point and make a decision that that was either the case or not the case. I think as representatives of the public, it's not good optics for the person who is being appealed to make a decision that the appeal should be dismissed for lack of standing, and the board that is tasked with making that decision never has the opportunity to look at it. So I would like to see us actually do a formal review on that, and I think that's what people are asking from us. Obviously, that takes a vote of this board to do that, and there may or may not be people who agree with me, but I feel pretty strongly about that.
Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to note too that in the memo, it does reference there are not just one elements of valid appeals. When in the code, it has 3 points. The memo does outline that. And any time, even an application or in this case, an appeal, if it doesn't meet one of those points, if the opportunity is there, staff gives the appellant or applicant the opportunity to rectify that or to show that they do have standing. That was noted in the memo. We did give the appellant the opportunity to show that they had standing. The appellant did not do that.
Just a question for staff. Did you, the very end of that, you said the appellant did not reply or?
No, they replied. If it is stated in the memo, they replied that they did not have basically standing via state or the city code, but it fell under the federal regulations. So they could pursue the matter that way if they chose.
Well, again, I think that is really our decision whether or not they met that requisite. But again, there may or may not be other board members who agree with me.
Barry, this is Dean again. I'm just trying to get clarification on are there two issues here? One is a review of the director's decision, and then would it also include, or separately, would we review the allegations made by Mr. Haas? Is it two things, one thing, or is it both of them that we're considering here?
Well, I think they're related, but I don't think that a consideration of whether or not the planning director's decision was, okay, the appeal was whether or not the planning director's decision was correct or was proper.
Right.
I think it was.
And that is the underlying issue, and I know that there are a lot of people who would like for us to talk about that. I don't think that this is the time or the place or the venue or that is a proper discussion for us presently. The question is, do we ask for the appeal to be forwarded to us so that that discussion could take place? And the first part of that discussion would be whether or not there is standing. If there is no standing, then there's no discussion. If there is standing, then that discussion proceeds. So, yes, the underlying issue is the appeal of whether or not the decision was proper, but there's a procedural matter that would need to be dealt with first.
Catherine, go ahead.
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry. I didn't.
I'm the chair, and I'm the one who recognizes speakers. Thank you. Okay, Catherine.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if the board is considering going down that path, I think staff would have to confer with the city attorney's office if that could even be done, since currently the city's position is it's an invalid appeal, so.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this item?
Yeah, I just have a point of clarification. I think it's mentioned in the correspondence. I would be recusing myself from any sort of votes related to that floodplain permit appeal. Barry, I think I followed what you were saying, but I think the staff notes it, that there's a floodplain coordinator whose decision is being appealed. It's the planning director's decision that standing has not been established in coordination with the city attorney's office. But I just wanted to clarify that just based upon what I saw in the memo. If there's any votes to be had, I have to recuse.
Thank you.
Point of order, I'd like to note that Mr. Watkins is an attorney for the developer, and he should be recused immediately.
Okay, he noted that. Thank you. All right, any further discussion? Okay, it appears that the board does not have an appetite to make any motion on this matter, so I guess we will move on to item 2 under miscellaneous.
Yeah, so we like to give you updates. And for, particularly in this case, next month is October, so we have our annual training. That would include your COMA training, your ethics and conflicts policies training. That's usually given by the city attorney's office. You may have been included on some emails for like group onboarding because they did the reconfiguration of the boards. So you are certainly welcome to attend those, but you will be getting similar training. We are doing our training the same as we have done it in the past this go-round because they happen next month, which is during the midst of all these other larger group onboard training. And you all get some additional, more technical training because you are a state statute board with technical responsibilities for hearing zoning variances requests. So we typically do that in October. We also do our elections in October. So be pondering who might want to be chair for the next year. And if you are up for that, put yourself forward. So we will do that next meeting as well. And then in conjunction with that board consolidation, they are doing a set of bylaws that cover all boards. Our board, again, is a little different. We're just going to be reviewing our bylaws and see if there are any policy items, for instance, like attendance and how many meetings if you miss, do we have to notify the appointing body? Policy things, we're going to want to align with those larger board bylaws. We will not be changing any of the state statute items in our bylaws. It would just be policy-related items. If we need to look at that, there may be an update to the bylaws. That would probably not happen until November, but just want to put it on your radar that we may be bringing the bylaws before you, just so that we can update any small policy items that are in there. And it looks like currently we do not have any items scheduled for October, so it will just be a business meeting. We'll have elections, the training, and then actually we will have minutes, I believe, as well. So you'll have some minutes from the July meeting and a couple meetings from the past to look through, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
If there is no further business, I will entertain a motion to,
We do not have a general public comment.
this
Yeah.
board does not have a public comment period. We may want to think about amending our bylaws to include that, but currently that is not part of our procedures.
I understand. Could I ask, I had two letters, one dated June 10th and the other dated July 25th, that were not included in the communications in the packet. Could I ask that those be added?
If they weren't received for this particular meeting, they were probably in the last packet. But if they weren't part of a communication directly to the planning office, they would have not been in the packet.
I will forward those letters to the planning office and ask that they be
They were sent-
included with our
Yeah, they may have been sent to
materials.
us, just not in the time frame for this particular meeting. It may have been from communication from a previous action.
I just wanted to make sure they were part of the record.
Okay,
They are definitely part of the public record. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And for the record, could you identify yourself, please?
Oh, sorry. My name is Richard Hurd, H-I-R-D, and I'm an attorney and I represent John Hass.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other business? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Board Member Rankin, I would motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second that.
All right.
And we can do a show of eyes if you would like for adjournment.
And before we vote, I just want to say goodbye to Travis and thank you for your service on this board. It's been really great to serve with you and really appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. I said my goodbyes in July. I stick by everything I said. It's been really great. I wish our new member, Mr. Sinkler, well. I'm glad to see that great people are still coming onto the board and willing to serve, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
On that note, too, one other update, just before you sign off, we do actually have a replacement seat already for Travis, so we will have another new board member for October. So,
All right. Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
thank you.
Go Chiefs.
Catherine?